Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Ndaizivei's story. Everyone thought it was over, but the Goblin had other plans. After a miracle at Heathrow, Ndaizivei entered the UK. Unseen by the immigration officers, a mother's prayer, thousands of miles away, had broken through the spiritual fog, giving her daughter just enough light to pass through. But the Goblin had followed. And what began in a quiet village in Zimbabwe was only just beginning in England. The evening had started out so calm. The Ashworth home was quiet, warm, and filled with the smell of roast chicken and mashed potatoes, mashed peas. Ndaizivei had just finished setting the table, carefully placing forks and napkins the way Mrs. Ashworth had taught her. Granny Ashworth sat at the head of the table, humming softly under her breath, while staring blankly into space. It had been a long day, and everyone was looking forward to a peaceful meal. Mrs. Ashworth walked in with the casserole dish, setting it on the table with a proud smile. "Dinner is served," she said cheerfully. Ndaizivei sat down, grateful for the moment of normalcy, and the three women bowed their heads for a brief prayer. Then it began. The salt shaker tipped over by itself. Forks rattled gently on the plates. Ndaizivei looked up, thinking maybe it was just the table shifting. But how can a large dining table shift on its own? But then the glasses started to vibrate, as if something was pacing around them. "Did anyone feel that?" Mrs. Ashworth asked, her brow furrowed. Before anyone could respond, a loud slurp echoed across the table. Granny Ashworth gasped, "Who is eating like a pig?" Her face had a scowl. Ndaizivei turned her head, and her mouth fell open. There, seated boldly at the far end of the table, was the Goblin. It was fully visible, its face twisted with joy, fingers digging into the mashed peas like a child in a sandpit. It scooped food directly into its mouth, smearing gravy across its chin. One by one, it sampled every dish, smashing the carrots, licking the dessert spoon, and finally sticking both hands into the casserole. Mrs. Ashworth let out a horrified yell. "Oh my word! It's eating with us!" Suddenly, the Goblin flung a scoop of mashed potatoes at the wall. The splat echoed. Then the Goblin laughed, loud, unhinged, and echoing with supernatural glee. A Yorkshire pudding went flying through the air and landed on the chandelier. For a brief second, no one spoke. They were frozen, shocked. Then a neighbor peeking through the window muttered, "Well, that's the most aggressive food fight I've ever seen." After the chaos at dinner the previous night, the day began quietly. The sun had barely risen, and the Ashworth household was quiet. Too quiet considering what had happened the night before. The peaceful hum of the washing machine came from the back room, where Ndaizivei folded the freshly dried laundry with careful precision. She had always taken pride in her neatness. Fold, stack, smooth. Fold, stack, smooth. It gave her a sense of control, considering what was going on around her. But as she moved on to the next pair of clean sheets, she heard a soft swish behind her. She turned just in time to see a pair of socks fly across the room and land perfectly on the doorknob. Her eyebrows knitted. Maybe it was the wind, she muttered. Then it happened again. A folded shirt slowly rose from the pile, hovered in mid-air, and flew out of the window with the grace of a bird. This time she screamed, "Mrs. Ashworth, something's wrong!" From the hallway, Mrs. Ashworth appeared holding her teacup. "What is it now?" she asked, but then her eyes widened in horror as she saw one of her bras fly past her like a kite. "Oh no, not my delicates! Oh no," she said. They both ran to the window, just in time to see a full parade of clothes, underwear, trousers, socks, and a bathrobe sailing across the garden like a flock of very confused birds. A pair of knickers had landed on the neighbor's rose bush. A silk petticoat slapped against the gardener's window. The goblin was perched on the curtain rod above them, laughing uncontrollably and clapping its little clawed hands with glee. "Stop it, you foul beast!" Mrs. Ashworth shouted, throwing a cushion at the goblin. It dodged with ease and tossed a towel in Mrs. Ashworth's face. Even the dog was barking at the ceiling, while the cat, once brave and composed, leapt into the fridge and shut the door behind itself. As the two women scrambled to retrieve the clothing from the lawn, the postman stopped at the gate, tilted his cap, and said with a smirk, "We've got flying knickers now, have we?" Mrs. Ashworth didn't laugh. She did not find it funny. She was starting to break, and the stress was written all over her face. It was a Tuesday morning when Mrs. Ashworth decided it was time to go shopping for food. "We have been in the house for too long, my dear. Maybe if we act normal, things will become normal." Ndaizivei nodded, hoping the trip to the local supermarket would give her a break from the eerie events haunting the Ashworth household. The goblin hadn't made an appearance all morning, and for once, the silence didn't feel threatening. As they entered the supermarket, everything seemed calm. Mrs. Ashworth walked alongside Ndaizivei as she pushed the shopping trolley slowly through the aisles, checking off items from the list. Bread, check. Milk, check. Eggs, check. They were halfway through the cereal aisle when it all began. The first sign was subtle. A jar of jam rolled itself off the shelf and exploded near a pensioner's foot. Mrs. Ashworth gasped and looked around, confused. Ndaizivei blinked. "Did you see that?" Mrs. Ashworth sighed. "Oh, don't start, please." But it was too late, because the chaos had just started and it was about to escalate. A tin of baked beans flew across the aisle and smacked itself on a shelf, knocking down 3 more cans. Cereal boxes began to tumble like dominoes. A man shouted, "What the devil? Who's throwing groceries around?" Suddenly, with a flash, the goblin appeared, right in the shopping trolley. Its wide eyes sparkled with mischief as it clapped its filthy hands and began tossing groceries like confetti. Apples, milk cartons, spaghetti, nothing was safe. It grabbed a sausage roll from a passing display and stuffed it in its mouth while spitting crumbs into the air. A lady screamed, "Is that a monkey in a vest?" A member of the staff grabbed his walkie-talkie. "Code 99 in aisle 7. Hurry, there's a creature loose in produce, and it's causing havoc. Hurry!" Mrs. Ashworth froze in place, her eyes locked on the goblin as it swung from the shelves like a deranged circus act, toppling jars and pulling down signs. Meanwhile, Ndaizivei could only see chaos, but not the cause. "Mrs. Ashworth, what is happening?" "It's him," she whispered. "He's followed us again." A pensioner ducked as a tin of custard flew over his head. As alarms blared and the security staff came to chase the goblin away, they themselves were scared of it. But because they had a job to do, they hurried towards the goblin, but luckily for them, it vanished into thin air, leaving behind a trail of disaster and a very confused store manager who simply declared, "The store is closing early today due to technical gremlins." The goblin made its way out of the supermarket and started crossing the street outside, leaving Ndaizivei and Mrs. Ashworth shocked and speechless. It was supposed to be a peaceful afternoon in the park, and Mrs. Ashworth thought a bit of sun might clear their heads. "Let's all get out for some fresh air. Perhaps it might banish whatever madness is in this house." They strolled through the park slowly, passing people who were walking their dogs and children playing. Ndaizivei pushed Granny Ashworth in her wheelchair. Granny grumbled because she did not like the cold. Everything felt oddly serene. like the eye of a storm. Then the sound of splashing was heard. Ndaizivei turned just in time to see some ducks scatter across the pond. A figure was running through the water at full speed, chasing the ducks. It was waving its arms and shrieking with laughter. It was the goblin, and it was soaking wet. It had grabbed a baby's bonnet, and it was wearing it. The children screamed as it leapt onto the park bench, and it did a backflip on the picnic table. Then it ran towards the playground. Parents froze. One dropped their coffee. Another grabbed their child and ran for dear life. What was happening? Granny Ashworth stared with her eyes wide open. That thing, it's wearing my wig, she shrieked. That thing stole my Sunday wig. She thought the baby bonnet was her wig. The goblin scaled the jungle gym, then grabbed an ice cream cone from a toddler and smashed it against its own face. A park goer with a thick Yorkshire accent shouted, "Oi! Someone call pest control. It's like bloody Lord of the Rings out here." A group of kids on the merry-go-round screamed as the goblin spun them faster than physics should allow. The wheel flew off its axle and landed in a flower bed. A man filming with his phone shouted, "This is going viral, mate. This has got to be a publicity stunt for a horror movie." Within 5 minutes, the entire park was empty. All that remained were the birds and overturned strollers. Ndaizivei was still pushing Granny Ashworth, but now they were heading back home. "Are you all right, Granny?" But Granny had a face like thunder, and she refused to speak. Mrs. Ashworth was beside herself with worry. That thing is turning public spaces into war zones," she said. "We are prisoners wherever we go. I hate this." Mrs. Ashworth was well known for hosting well-attended afternoon tea parties, where she served freshly baked scones, Earl Grey tea, and sandwiches. She would invite her friends for small, polite conversation about their dead husbands and gossip about their neighbors. Nothing was supposed to disturb that routine, maybe except death. That Thursday afternoon, she had thought it was a good idea to invite 3 of her oldest friends over. Ndaizivei helped to set the table in the dining room. She arranged porcelain cups, sugar cubes, and neatly cut cucumber sandwiches, scones, butter, and jam. "Don't say a word about the goblin," Mrs. Ashworth whispered. "These women will think we've lost our minds." The guests arrived. They were chatty and nosy as usual. They settled into their seats and were eager to have their tea. One reached for a sugar cube, and the goblin appeared beside her hand, and it dipped its filthy finger into her teacup. "Oh my!" she gasped. The other woman froze in shock, and one fainted immediately. The goblin grinned, climbed onto the table, and dipped its foot into the jug full of cream. Then it snatched a scone and stuffed the entire thing in its mouth without chewing. "It's using the teaspoon as a toothpick," one lady cried. Mrs. Ashworth stood frozen with her hands shaking. Meanwhile, the goblin poured tea on its head and yelled, "Hot bath, hot bath." A teacup shattered as the goblin threw it onto the floor. One woman stood up, muttered under her breath, "I did not survive the war to have my patience tested with this kind of nonsense. What is this, Joyce?" She looked at Mrs. Ashworth and stormed out. Ndaizivei backed into the corner. "I can't see it. I can't see anything. What's happening?" She couldn't see the goblin. The goblin made itself visible to her and winked at her. It licked the spoon and vanished into thin air, leaving behind a mess. The one remaining guest turned to Mrs. Ashworth. "Dear, what on earth are you housing in this place?" "I don't know anymore," Mrs. Ashworth whispered, pouring herself a double brandy in the teacup. It was nearly midnight when the mirror in Granny Ashworth's room began to hum. Yes, the mirror was humming. Granny Ashworth was brushing her hair in silence, as she did every night. Her movements were slow and methodical, until suddenly she stopped and looked into the mirror and saw herself smiling. This was bizarre. because she herself wasn't smiling. How could this be? Her reflection blinked. It waved and winked at her. Then it slowly started to brush its own hair. Granny screamed so loud that Mrs. Ashworth and Ndaizivei ran into the room, nearly knocking each other to the ground. "What's going on?" Mrs. Ashworth asked. "That's not me in the mirror," Granny cried, pointing a trembling finger at the mirror. Then the reflection began to change. The face twisted and shrank into something uglier. The goblin appeared in the mirror, grinning. In its hands, it held Granny's dentures. It popped them into its mouth and began flossing between the teeth using her pearl necklace. "Oh no, this thing is going to send me to my early death," Granny yelled, reaching for her Bible. The mirror cracked down the center, and Ndaizivei looked at both Granny and Mrs. Ashworth. She was confused and terrified. "I don't see anything. What is it?" She honestly could not see the goblin. Mrs. Ashworth whispered, "It's using Granny's mirror. It's using Granny's face." Just then, the room filled with the sound of hysterical goblin laughter. The air grew ice cold. The mirror shattered completely, and pieces of glass flew everywhere. Granny Ashworth shouted, "Not today, devil," and chucked her slipper at the broken frame. The goblin vanished, but the damage was done. The floor was full of shattered glass, and the three women could hardly breathe due to fear. From that night on, Granny refused to sleep in her own room again. Mrs. Ashworth sat at the edge of the bed. She was lost for words, and all she managed to do was say, "This thing, it's not just haunting us, it's toying with us, and I don't know how much more I can take." That night, as the clock struck 12, it seemed as if it had given the goblin the energy to sing. At first, it was a soft, very low, deep, and strangely off-key. It floated down the hallway like a ghostly lullaby, growing louder with each step. Then came the strange knocking sounds, tap, 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 a rhythm with no source. Then the pots began to rattle in the kitchen. Mrs. Ashworth sat up in bed, her nerves fraying. "Oh, not again, not again. It's midnight, for crying out loud." Ndaizivei lay awake in the guest room, hugging her pillow, praying silently. This time, she could hear the noise. The melody was haunting and bizarrely familiar to her. Hold on a minute. Was the goblin singing a language that sounded suspiciously familiar? Was it singing in Shona? The goblin had learned her mother tongue and was belting out the lullaby in the middle of the night. It began banging pots and skipping around the living room and shouting snippets of the traditional Shona lullaby. "Ewe, ewe." It sang, and it sang very badly. In the middle of it, it howled like a jackal, then whispered nonsense in the hallway. "Sleep now, sleep forever." The dog howled, and the cat ran into the toilet, almost flushing itself. Neighbors began knocking on the walls. One even came to the front door and rang the doorbell. "Excuse me." A man stood in his flannel pajamas. "But could you kindly tell your possessed child to shut the hell up? Most of us have got work to do in the morning." Mrs. Ashworth didn't even respond. She did not have the energy. But what could she say? She simply turned to the wall and muttered, "Lord, please make it end." At exactly 12:45 a.m., the singing stopped. Silence fell, thick and heavy, but no one slept, not that night. The following morning, the goblin started its antics with an orange. One moment, the orange was in the fruit bowl. The next, it levitated 6 inches in the air and began to rotate. Mrs. Ashworth stood frozen in the kitchen, knife in hand and half buttered bread. "Ndaizivei," she said slowly. Is that fruit floating?" Before she could answer, the entire fruit bowl rose from the table, spinning like a lazy carousel. Bananas were bobbing, apples tumbled in mid-air, and the grapes were dancing. And then, without warning, the bananas began peeling themselves. The skins flopped to the floor, and one banana twisted in mid-air and flung its peel at Mrs. Ashworth's face. Splat! Right, she muttered, wiping her cheek. Now the fruits have gone crazy and violent too? The goblin suddenly appeared on the counter, doing a dance. It was wearing one of the peeled banana skins like a hat. It grabbed an apple and bit into it before spitting it directly into the toaster. Ndaizivei gasped as she saw the apple shoot back out of the toaster and hit the wall. I don't know what to say anymore, she cried. The goblin opened the fridge and started throwing eggs onto the floor, each one breaking with a loud crack. The floor became a slippery mess of egg yolk. The fruit bowl spun faster and faster, eventually launching an orange straight into the chandelier, causing the light bulb to explode. Mrs. Ashworth fell into a nearby kitchen chair, her dressing gown stained with juice, and all she could do was stare in disbelief. The goblin bowed dramatically, applauded itself, and vanished into thin air. As the sun went down that evening, Granny Ashworth's porcelain doll, which normally sat on the mantel, started to act differently. Ndaizivei had just finished dusting when she noticed that the doll's head had turned slightly and was now facing the door instead of the bookshelf. She straightened it gently, but a few minutes later it turned again. There was no sound, no movement, just a slow, silent shift. Granny Ashworth wheeled herself into the room and frowned. That doll is looking at me funny. Oh, Granny, maybe it's just... Ndaizivei started to speak, and then she froze as the doll spoke. I don't like her, it said in a gravely male voice. She doesn't belong here. Granny Ashworth gasped. Ndaizivei dropped the duster. The doll turned its head 180 degrees and blinked, one eye slower than the other. She brings shadows, it said. Send her back to Zimbabwe. How did the doll know where Ndaizivei came from? Mrs. Ashworth ran into the room at the sound of the screams. What now? The doll stood up. Yes, it stood up. With its tiny porcelain legs, it walked to the edge of the mantel, stared at Ndaizivei, and added, She will break this home. She must go back. The room was plunged into silence. This was worse than a horror movie. A local priest was summoned. He arrived with holy water and an old Bible. He began reciting prayers while sprinkling the doll. It began to giggle. Then it slapped him very hard across the face. The priest was shocked. He yelled and dropped his Bible and ran out of the front door as fast as possible, yelling, This house needs more than Jesus. The doll sat down, smiling like a well-behaved child, and hasn't moved since. And no one has touched it. No one dares to touch it. The next morning, Ndaizivei went outside to hang the laundry again, hoping for a quiet day. But something felt wrong. She could feel it in her spirit. The air was too still. The flowers were trembling, as if they were being shaken by someone. Mrs. Ashworth joined her to check on the roses. Look at this lavender bush, she muttered. It's practically humming. Then the soil began to shift, slowly, like something was wriggling beneath it. One by one, the flower beds rearranged themselves. The tulips turned in unison. Daisies pointed north. Then the sunflowers flattened and bent to form the word, return. Dear heavens, Mrs. Ashworth whispered, backing away. The garden is sending messages now. Ndaizivei dropped her basket. This isn't real. This can't be real. Suddenly, the goblin appeared, sitting on the edge of the bird bath, sipping wine and wearing Granny's sun hat. Water me, woman, it cackled. Water me like a thirsty tomato. Then the hosepipe turned itself on. A jet of water sprayed into the sky and formed the shape of a serpent before collapsing back into the mud. A neighbor peeked over the fence and muttered, Blimey, first you had the flying laundry, Now I see floral messages. Are you people filming an episode of Doctor Who? The goblin ran through the herb patch, kicked over a gnome, and vanished behind the hedges. Mrs. Ashworth dropped the shears she was holding and said coldly, I am done with this. I can't take this anymore. That afternoon, the snow had started to fall, and Mrs. Ashworth convinced Ndaizivei to go for a walk in the local park. We need fresh air, she said, and don't worry, goblins hate the cold. How wrong was she? The park was idyllic. Children were laughing, building snowmen, and throwing snowballs, the kind of scene you'd find on a Christmas card. Then suddenly, a snowball soared through the air and struck a small boy with impossible force. He spun like a cartoon character and landed on his bottom. He looked around in confusion. Who threw that? Another snowball rocketed across the field and hit a woman's shopping bag, exploding milk and bread across the snow. Then the goblin revealed itself. It was wearing a scarf and running in circles. It was throwing snowballs to the children with pinpoint accuracy. Its aim was deadly. The children scattered, crying. One girl shouted, "Mommy, a naked gremlin is chasing me." The goblin belly flopped onto a snowman and exploded it into powder. It slid on its stomach down a hill and knocked over a sled. Mrs. Ashworth froze. It's back. Oh, good God, it's back. Parents screamed, and people started taking their phones out to take videos and photographs. One man shouted as he filmed, "It's a cryptid. It's going viral." Meanwhile, the goblin grabbed someone's hot chocolate and drank it in one gulp and then farted steam. A group of kids tried to fight back with snowballs, but the goblin dodged each one with cartoon-like agility. It retaliated by launching a snowball, which hit a toddler's father squarely between the eyes. There was chaos in the park. "Call the council police," someone shouted, mortified by everything that had happened. Mrs. Ashworth grabbed Ndaizivei's coat sleeve. "We are going home, and we are going now." That night, the house was silent, but only because the Ashworths were too exhausted to scream. Mrs. Ashworth sat in her armchair, her robe wrinkled, her hair undone, staring blankly at the fireplace. She looked exhausted and had lost her spark. Granny Ashworth whispered to herself in Latin. The priest had sent her a crucifix and had refused to return to the haunted house. Ndaizivei stood in the hallway, with her suitcase beside her, ready for her journey the following morning. Her eyes were puffy from crying. "I am so sorry," she said softly. "I don't know why this is happening." "I never meant for your life to turn into a nightmare," she said to Mrs. Ashworth. Mrs. Ashworth looked at her for a long time. "You've done nothing wrong, my dear, but whatever that thing is, it followed you, and now it's tearing this house apart." She sighed. "I believe in prayer. I believe in faith, but I also believe in reality. And the reality here is, we can't take this anymore. You must go home, Ndaizivei. Maybe there, something or someone can help you." With trembling hands, she handed Ndaizivei a one-way plane ticket to Harare. The next morning, Ndaizivei boarded her flight. She stared out of the window the entire way, suppressing the urge to cry. Then she saw the reflection in the glass beside her. It wasn't hers. It was the goblin, smiling. It had achieved its mission. When she landed, her mother was waiting with a cross, anointing oil, and a team of prayer warriors. They embraced in a tight hug, but they knew that the fight was far from over, because the goblin had returned home too. Deep beneath the surface of the village, something else was awakening. Only this time, it had grown stronger. Thank you for watching. What do you think is really going on with Ndaizivei now that she's back where it all started? Do you think the nightmare is truly over now that she's back in Zimbabwe, or that it has just started? I would love to hear your thoughts. What part shocked you most in this episode? Do you think Ndaizivei will survive what's coming next? Let me know what you think in the comment section. See you in part 3.